So just a brief introduction about Lloyd and myself. I've been with Oliver Wight now for 6 years. Prior to that, I worked for Caterpillar for 25 years, worked in every function apart from HR, and crucially led two programs partnering with Oliver Wight, two transformation programs, and they were so transformational for the business that I was in, that ultimately I decided that I wanted to do this kind of work all the time. So that's why I joined Oliver Wight, and now take our methodology and my experience to help clients in all sorts of sectors. This topic today, moving from sales and operations planning to integrated business planning, is a very popular topic with many of the clients that I've worked with. Lloyd, over to you.
Thank you. Morning, everybody. Yes, Lloyd Snowden. Prior to joining Oliver Wight in 2000, I used to work in the train industry, building trains for British Rail, and then eventually we were more standalone, having gone through privatisation, selling trains all around the world. And during that time, I did, similar to Dawn, 3 what we call Class A implementations. And at the end of that, having become a VP and then a managing director, I joined Oliver Wight in 2000. So I'm in my now 19th year of doing these different activities with a whole variety of different companies, as Dawn has already explained. So hopefully we can share some interesting insights and help you try and build that case for S&OP to IBP.
Thanks, Lloyd. So just a bit more introduction to the company Oliver Wight. I know quite a few of you online know of us, and some of you are working with us already. But for those who don't know, Oliver Wight was an American gentleman, founded our company 50 years ago this year. So we're having our 50th anniversary celebration in July. That we have 65 partners around the world who, like Lloyd and myself, have all been clients of Oliver Wight first, have all spent considerable amount of time in industry. So we are practitioners of Class A as clients, as well as now within Oliver Wight. Our business model is to transfer our knowledge of best practice to you and your teams, and to through education workshops to guide you in applying that knowledge through design workshops to your business, because you're the experts in your business, and then to coach you as you refine the design of your new processes and new ways of working in the future, and then coaching you through implementation. So it's a bit of a different business model from perhaps other management consultancies. We don't come and live with you. We just visit and help you as you need it. And we find, our clients find, that is not only more cost effective as an approach, but it also means that the solution is your solution, and it's much more sustainable, and it's defended by your people because it's their ideas that have led to the solution itself. So as Lloyd said, we work in multiple industries. We have a proven methodology. It's called the Proven Path, which we'll show you at the end of the session. And that would also help you in terms of building your case for change, that we'll talk about through the session. So if we just have a brief look at the kinds of customers that we have been working with, we've put a selection of different sectors here. This is just a brief extract from some of the customers that we have been working with. You see Caterpillar on there, which is obviously where I came from, who ultimately built Oliver Wight's methodology into the Caterpillar production system. But many other customers from around the world, different sectors, and have not just worked with us on integrated business planning. The Class A standard has 9 chapters, and some of these businesses have worked with us on other processes, key processes, and ways of working in their business. So to the topic in hand then, we showed you this slide in the last webinar back in February just explaining the evolution of sales and operations planning to integrated business planning. Over the years, as Mr. Oliver Wight, our founder, started back in the 70s, S&OP was really aimed, it was developed for one of our clients and aimed at helping that client to balance demand and supply volumes in the relatively short term. But the needs of businesses over the years have evolved, and we have evolved the process to meet those needs, integrating financials, inventory, new product introduction, and in the late 90s, we renamed it because it really became more about integrating all of the functions of the business behind one optimized plan to meet the needs of the business over time. That led on to refocusing the process to a balance between realizing the strategic plan as well as tactical planning. That brought in scenario planning, and then in more recent years, extended supply chain collaboration downstream to customers and upstream to suppliers, really understanding the capability of the supply chain as a whole to be competitive and meet customer needs. And latterly, we've been talking about enterprise integrated business planning, EBP, really harnessing the opportunities of new technologies like artificial intelligence, big data analysis, dynamic analytics, and so on. And so this year, you'll see we are holding quite a few events during the year to tell you more about EBP and discuss how that might help you into the future. So I guess the question that we asked in the last webinar was in a poll was where were the participants' processes at the time, and there were quite a few who, in fact, I think about 50% of the people said they felt their process was stuck in the 80s. So I guess for those of you who didn't attend the last webinar, where do you think you are at the moment? Do you feel like our participants in the last webinar that your process is stuck in the 80s, or do you actually feel that it's further ahead than that? Which elements of true IBP do you think that you have, and which elements might be missing? So on the screen now, you can see the depiction of the integrated business planning process. Essentially, it's a process with 5 elements, starting with the product management review. Some people call this the portfolio management review. And that's really around drawing in feeder information from your day-to-day staging gate process, your new product introduction process, your product deletion process, the processes you use to change and grow your portfolio or enhance your portfolio over time. And that portfolio may be products, it may be services, it may be both. And the product management review is a cross-functional team meeting monthly to review the overall status of all of the projects that you have ongoing at the moment and that you're planning into the future, and really to review, assess, are we on track in terms of delivering the portfolio enhancements that we're looking for strategically into the future? And where we have gaps, where we may have gone off track, what can we do to close those gaps and get back on track? And the product management review team publish the updated product master plan, including the volumes and values and resources that it will take to deliver that product master plan to the other elements of the process. And the next element that picks that up is the demand review. So the demand management review team, usually sales, marketing, brand management, potentially finance, looking at that portfolio, that revised portfolio into the future, and this is usually over a horizon of 24 to 36 months, say to themselves, what can we do? using the sales and marketing resources that we have over that period of time to optimize the unconstrained demand coming into this business in our target markets, in our target market sectors. And so they are then working up a further optimized demand plan, volumes, values, usually revenue and gross margin at least, and a sales and marketing activity plan that will drive and influence that demand over that horizon. And they're capturing not just the numbers, but importantly, the assumptions and the planned events that are going to underpin that demand plan. That plan then goes forward to the supply review team, who in their turn work out the optimal way to meet the demand in a cost-effective way, both from a product cost and an inventory profile perspective, and also working out where are they at in terms of delivering their part of the strategy. So it could be optimizing the network, the manufacturing footprint, the quality delivery of the business, the way we optimize customer service. So they revise and re-optimize the supply plan. And all the way through the month, the integrated reconciliation team are pulling together the product demand and supply plans, consolidating those plans into one holistic business plan going forward over that rolling 24 to 36 month horizon, and identifying the decisions that could not be made by the individual product demand and supply reviews. Some decisions will be made in those reviews, but the pan business decisions, the ones that are perhaps beyond the threshold, the authority threshold of the product demand and supply review teams, come together through integrated reconciliation, and they prepare all of the materials for the management business review, the fifth element. They prepare the agenda, they prepare the consolidated plan and the underpinning assumptions and planned events, and they identify the issues and opportunities, the vulnerabilities and opportunities, vulnerabilities within the plan and how to defend against those vulnerabilities, the opportunities above the plan and how to exploit those opportunities, and then present the material to the management business review, who would then take the decisions that they've been asked to take and ensure that the business has the direction it needs to drive forward and deliver on its commitments. And that final arrow in the top right-hand corner there is very important, because it's saying not only do we conduct this cycle monthly, but we then need to communicate the outputs and decisions from that revised plan out into the business. So but quite different from a sales and operations planning process. So here's a summary really of the S&OP versus the IBP process from its evolution back in the mid-1980s when it was formulating a plan to drive through MRP and MRP2 to be executed in the business. And in the middle there, you can see when we are called into companies to look at their sales and operations planning process, what we tend to find is that it is a process largely focused on volumes, balancing supply and demand volumes, relatively short term, really quite execution based, and quite often driven by the supply chain team because they need a plan to drive and plan production output. So hopefully you've heard from the description, the brief description I've given of the Oliver Wight integrated business planning process, that you can see depicted on the right-hand side. That's really quite different. It's over a much longer horizon. It's planning the whole business and working out how best to deploy the strategy. And it's when the process is mature, people working this process tend to spend a lot of time, quality time, not just understanding the numbers, that comes quickly. It's about focusing on where the gaps are how those gaps have opened up, and crucially, how best to close those gaps and get us back on track. So finally from me, before I hand over to Lloyd, just starting now to take you through the different elements of the business case and the different groups of people you'd need to get on board, and the arguments that we tend to find resonate with those groups in terms of getting their buy-in. Now, clearly, you need to start with leadership. If you're in a position, for example, where your executive team today look at the sales and operations planning process really as a supply chain process, something that goes on underneath them in the business, and supply chain tend to take care of it, you do need to explain to them just how different integrated business planning is and what it gives to them. And one of the crucial things that it gives to the executive team is a process to bind together, to integrate all of the functions and all of the key stakeholders of the business behind one plan. So in terms of the people, clearly that quite often, and I've worked on this a couple of times recently, a business case needs to go to the board, to shareholders, to support the transformation program that it would take. So they will want to know the benefits that having such a process in the business will deliver, and we'll come on to those benefits a bit more precisely later on. I've been working this morning with one of my customers on a communication for their customers about the current pain points that they have with my client, and how the new process is going to address those pain points and remove that pain from those customers, and indeed save customers money. So we need to get the leadership team on board itself, and to have each leader of each function understand the benefit from the perspective of their function, which Lloyd will take you through in a minute. And there'll also be direct benefits for suppliers, such as a much more visibility over a longer horizon of your requirements to them. So ultimately, all of the layers of the business would become involved in the program. And once you've decided how you're going to operate your IBP process, your leadership groups would teach the process through the rest of the business. In terms of the core processes, it is a process that brings all of those processes together into one monthly business planning cycle, including the support functions, as you can see on the screen. It harnesses together or connects the key business horizons, the strategic horizon from your strategic planning process, maybe 5 to 10 years, because it's deploying that plan. It's operating itself, focusing on just outside your time fence, so your cumulative lead time, which typically is around 4 months, to a rolling 24 or 36 months. It delivers a plan to be executed into your near term, inside your time fence. So it connects those 3 time horizons together. And you know, a lot of businesses can get started with integrated business planning without buying a new system, you know, just get started with something quite basic. But once you've got started, and once you've decided which data you need from your existing systems, you might move on to a piece of software that enhances the IBP process, but it's not always absolutely necessary. Depending on the size of your business and the complexity of your business, we work with some people who have quite sophisticated modeling and analytics capability. And as I said earlier, some people are starting to work with artificial intelligence and big data systems. But we work with other customers who have a less complex business, who operate the process using Excel. Lloyd, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Dawn. So here we have what we call the integrated business model, and you can see where integrated business planning sits within this particular diagram. And it kind of sits between what we call strategic management, or the strategic planning process, and the detail, if you like, day-to-day, week-by-week activities that support product demand and supply. So in a sense, integrated business planning is becoming the engine to drive the deployment of your strategy. And interestingly, there are statistics in the marketplace that approach an understanding that many deployed strategies fail because they don't have a process that delivers them. So one of the key hooks for an integrated business planning process is to enable the ongoing deployment of strategy through the different steps of integrated business planning to make sure as a business you're actually delivering the expectations of your strategic business objectives. So in this particular diagram, there are, if you like, 3 horizons that we need to observe. The first one is the strategic planning horizon, which can be anything from 5 to 10 to 20 or even beyond years, depending upon the business you're in. We then have the integrated business planning horizon, which is the 4 to 24 month or even 36, 48 month process that organizations need to decide upon as they're actually designing their integrated business planning process to ensure they make decisions in time for when they see things in the future. And then the final horizon is the one that a lot of people refer to as detailed planning, control, or execution, which is the 0 to 3 months. So we have 3 very critical horizons that need to have management time spent on them to make sure that the business can actually deliver against all requirements. In this picture, however, you can kind of see that there is a hierarchy from an organizational point of view. And if you think about strategic management, it's usually the CEO and the leadership team that own and start to develop and deploy the strategy. Integrated business planning is the leadership team and middle management. And then as you go down to the execution horizon, middle management and the people in the factories, if you like, the blue collar workers and those people working in the here and now. And you can, loosely speaking, put an organizational hierarchy on the top of this picture that kind of depicts how that is working. But one thing that we find is that as organizations start to progress, the true reality is that the whole organization tends to compress into the short-term horizon only, and very limited time is spent managing the business through integrated business planning or an integrated business planning process, and very little time managing the strategic planning process and where the organization needs to go over the next 5 to 10 years. So the introduction of an integrated business planning process in comparison to how sales and operations planning looks today in many organizations provides the information to encourage people to focus more on the 4 to 24 month horizon rather than just execution. So in doing that, you are progressively starting to decompress the organization to enable certain people in the company to focus on business planning, and then other people in the organization to focus on execution. So in doing that, we need to make sure that we have the trust in the organization to enable people in the short term to truly accept empowerment and delegated authority so that they can make decisions without the need of senior management or the leadership team being there to make those decisions. That then releases people to focus on a 4 to 24 month process, such as integrated business planning, to start making decisions about the future, such that when the future becomes today, we're ready for it and it is no longer a surprise. So a key hook for many organizations is to actually understand if their organization is compressed or partly compressed, so that they can actually start to work on the ability to decompress the organisation and provide the right focus of attention to those different horizons of strategic planning, integrated business planning and execution. And in doing that, you're actually walking the talk of many of the expectations that company put forward when they're going to change, and that is to have an empowered organisation, a team-based organisation, and an organisation that is allowed to make decisions at the right levels in the organisation, because the sooner a decision is made, the better off the business is going to be. And providing companies are looking right into the future with integrated business planning rather than just the budget year, if decisions are made about that future, the cycle then has the time to reassess those decisions based on new information so that they can be adjusted through the monthly process. But if our attention is constantly in the short term, then making decisions becomes more and more difficult and more really in a firefighting kind of mode, which is knee-jerk reaction sometimes rather than a very planned and cost-effective kind of solution. So that's some of the key messages associated with the integrated model, getting the ability to focus on the right horizons at the right time with the right people. In the next slide, what does good look like in terms of some of the activities associated with people when you're at the bottom of phase 1 business maturity, when you're moving more towards the top of phase 1 maturity, and then looking to actually get towards the top of phase 2. And these words in these columns read from left to right, and you can start to see how moving to those different horizons, you can actually start to enjoy different circumstances in your culture and organization. So bottom of phase 1, there tends to be one management style, which is kind of tell and do. In its worst would be autocratic, and we refer to that as just being managed. At the top of phase 1, when you're more in control, then you move to a more managed and led organization. And then when you move into phase 2, it's all about leading. So when you talk about things like situational leadership, for example, at the bottom of phase 1, it's very difficult to deploy because there tends to be only one management style available, which is tell and do. But as you get into top of phase 1 and towards the top of phase 2, the ability to deploy different management styles as you get to know your organization, get to know your people, and start to work those different horizons means you can deploy different styles to manage different people. It's also interesting to understand that bottom of phase 1, you tend to have that compressed organization that we just talked about. As you move into top of phase 1, you are starting to decompress that organization, so beginning to look into the business planning horizon of integrated business planning. And then towards the top of phase 2, there is a greater ability to really start focusing on strategic planning, so you have a more fully decompressed organization. So there are many benefits to be gained when you start to understand what decompressing the organization will enable in terms of the culture and the management of your people, and how they become released into a more team-based mindset from potentially being more like an individual working on their own to try and achieve what they can in their own sphere of capability. But if you look at this from a cost point of view, when you're down at the bottom of phase 1 and you're working very, very hard to deal with many different changes in the short term, because it's a more firefighting environment, the environment itself tends to be very costly. As you start to get into that more decompressed organization in phase 1 and you're more in control, the costs are getting to be more in control, and therefore you can start to deliver more of your profit promise. As you're moving towards phase 2 and you're starting to plan to be more agile rather than reacting, being a firefighting company, you become more cost effective. And then cost efficient. And then as you move towards the top of phase 2 and you might be planning to give an agile response, you become more cost effective. So the whole environment becomes a lot more controlled and a lot more understood by different people at different levels. And therefore, integrated business planning is enabling that greater team-based mindset and team-based capability. So looking into why would we do this in terms of the different core processes associated with integrated business planning, if we look at product management, and there are a number of things on this slide, but I just want to focus on the red ones, because after the webinar, you're going to obtain these slides so you can read into the other content more at your leisure. But one of the things that we find very advantageous for products is the proactive management of the portfolio, delivering on the target earnings. So when we think about the offering in the marketplace, the portfolio that you take to market, we need to be certain that the margin development is in line with expectations. So if the margin is developing within expectations and all of the things start to happen well within the organization, the eventual profit release will be really good based on costs being under control. The next one associated with this slide is holistic management of resources. One of the things that Oliver Wight finds in many organizations is that this is the first part of a core process that needs a real multifunctional team to enable projects to be successful. If we don't understand what resources we require going out into the future, then the project's success and therefore the delivery of new items into the portfolio starts to be delayed, and therefore you're not going to be achieving what is required in the marketplace. And the final one here is that the whole thing about integrated business planning is making sure that each of the core processes is integrated with each other. And in doing that, we need to make sure that based on the business case of new ideas and new innovations that are going through your project funnel, that they at a point in time are put into the demand plan to ensure that there is a signal to supply to say, please get ready to deliver. So a very important aspect is making sure that we have that integration into the demand plan. The next slide talks about, so what's in it for sales and marketing? And there's quite a bit of information associated with this particular slide that represents the results that people have given about what they accredit to an integrated business planning process. So the biggest one here is that a lot of people that were asked about what type of improvements do they see in the main from an IBP process point of view once implemented, is a 52% of the respondents said they had an increase in revenue. And then if you just go around this diagram in a clockwise direction, there are then three that are talking about 31% are saying improved perfect order delivery, better, so there are those that are saying better supply planning and schedule adherence. And then we move into the improved new product inventory at 28%, reduction inventory 27%. So integrated business planning addresses many of the topics that sit with the senior leadership teams in organizations, things that actually they think about when they're going to bed and keep them awake at night. So some significant benefits to come from the step associated with sales and marketing. And then the final slide in this section talks about what's in it for finance. And sometimes you find that finance feel that working in integrated business planning process will take away some of the power from the finance organization. In truth, as people start to understand it, it kind of doubles the opportunity for finance to contribute. One, in terms of this is where we are based on all of the activities we've just done historically, but also looking into the future, what from a financial point of view does the future look like in contributing to the business? So some of the things that really become very advantageous in this team-based process of integrated business planning is the use of one set of numbers and one plan that everybody follows. So when financial forecasts are done, they're done from the bottom-up numbers developed through product demand and supply to enable those forecasts to go forward, and that those forecasts actually include any gaps that have been identified to actually say to people that we have confidence in what we're doing because we understand the gaps and we have opportunities identified in the future that will enable us to actually close those gaps down. Again, from a finance point of view, if you look into the different steps of product demand and supply, there is the real need to encourage the integration of financing into each of those steps so we can understand how the finances are being contributed to from product demand and supply. But more importantly, when we look into the future, we can ensure that decisions are made based on volume and value. If we only base our decisions on volume, then we could keep everybody very busy, but ultimately the actual financial situation of the company may not be what was anticipated because we're taking finance into account too late. The next one that we've identified here in red is the formal cross-functional management of vulnerabilities and opportunities. These are very important and need to be understood in good detail. An opportunity is a general upside to the current plan that you're seeing in the future, that should you need to close a gap, you could put a team of people on to turn that opportunity into something you could confidently put into the plan. A vulnerability, on the other hand, is something that is already in your plan, but as you look into the future, you can see some potential challenges that may bring a downside. The one thing we need to understand with vulnerabilities and opportunities is what is their potential financial contribution. Now, some companies look at opportunities and vulnerabilities and net them off against each other, which actually is not the purpose of this, because in truth, the vulnerabilities, if we manage them well, may never happen. The opportunities, therefore, would be true upsides that we need to look at to say, what do we really need to do to capture those upsides and move the business further forward? Another big advantage of integrated business planning that people really enjoy is that once you've got trust in the numbers in your 24-month rolling or 36-month rolling or 40-month rolling plan, you actually don't really need to have the traditional 6-month, 3-month annual budgeting process. The numbers that you need for your budget are actually in the integrated business planning figures. So you can eliminate that budgeting process for the future. And we have many examples of organizations that have achieved that, and we do use that as one of our key identifiers of a good Class A integrated business planning process. And of course, the final one is that as you do look into the future and you may see some gaps, then we need to introduce the capability of scenarios, modelings, what ifs, to determine alternatives that we can look at, financially costed, to ensure that we can then go forward with recommendations that the management team can decide upon to enable the business to have further and future success. So these are some of the things that we see important as ways of engaging organisations to move to an IBP process from S&OP.
Thank you, Lloyd. So
over to you.
Yes, hopefully you'll have some good insights there into how to speak to your colleagues in product, sales and marketing, finance, and so on. If you are, if you're not in one of those functions, about what's in integrated business planning for them. So, we know that quite a few of you registered for this webinar are in supply chain. In the appendix of slides that we will make available to you, we have the what's in it for supply chain for those of you on the phone who are not in supply chain. But within this slide deck, you've got hopefully the perspectives, the arguments that will explain the what's in it for the different functions within the business. They're different perspectives. They want different things out of this process. They've got different aspects of the strategic plan to deliver, and there are advantages for each of the areas of the business in the process, in addition to clearly what supply chain will get from it. And that, you know, as the Lloyd started with those arguments that are particularly important for the leadership team as a whole, your executive team, in terms of, you know, if they're in a situation where they feel drawn down into the here and now and firefighting the near term, this is a way of getting them back into the time horizon and the strategic value add that they want to give to the business. So in the last webinar, not only did some of you ask for some help to build the business case to move from S&OP to IBP, but you also asked for some examples of customers who have done it, of businesses who've done it. So on the screen is the first example. It's a company with whom we've been working for some years now, and they have cooperated with us to put together a customer profile, which is available on our website, and we will send it to you after the webinar. And this is a summary of the benefits that this company, Uponor, have delivered through working with us. Uponor is a plumbing and indoor climate solutions business. They started working with us because they had a number of issues that they were wrestling with. Their inventories were swelling out of control. They had a significant portfolio complexity. You can see, you know, over 120,000 different SKU codes, and were concerned about the further growth of that complexity and size of portfolio. They really felt the lack of good integration of the functions across the business in addressing those issues and other issues in the business. And, you know, not only were the functions working in silos, but each site within the business was working in a disconnected way. So they started working with us, and the value that they've delivered and documented attributable to the program, you can see on the bottom of the screen there, increasing their net sales. So that to the point that Lloyd made, they're one of the people that have seen an increase in revenue that they attribute to the business, to the process. They've seen a 30% improvement in service to customers, in on time in full, a 50% reduction in their inventories. So that was one of their core problems that they've worked through in the process. Lloyd talked about the way the process enables you to focus on exploiting opportunities and mitigating risks, and that certainly helped Uponor. And it's connected up the functions and the sites so that they now work collaboratively and make integrated decisions that they've come at through this bottom-up planning, collaborative planning, and then they're all committed to executing on those decisions. So that was one example. Just to go on to a smaller company, a company called Suntech in France, and their situation was pretty drastic, pretty dire when they first started talking to us. They were facing bankruptcy, frankly. They had detrimental operational practices and processes, serious cash flow problems, in their own words, a chaotic supply chain, didn't really have a good ability to forecast and plan their future, which was another factor that was making their investors very nervous. And to Lloyd's point about early phase one characteristic in terms of business maturity, a very autocratic style of management, a very sort of tell and do, and therefore they weren't getting the best from their people through the way they were being managed. So through this program was not, the process. Yes, it did focus on the process, but one of the major focuses here, as in so many of our programs, was on the people change management and the cultural change. They have achieved the Class A milestone in integrated business planning. They now have their cash flow under control. They've increased their profit margin up to 10 to 15%. They are now working to that next level of maturity where they've not only got their own house in order, but they're starting to work in closer cooperation with their key suppliers and their key customers, and probably regaining their trust. I know the customer profile talks about their cash flow problems causing them some big problems paying their suppliers. So that would have really damaged the relationships. So they're rebuilding the trust in those relationships. Their forecast accuracy has improved, which gives a better, more reliable plan through the supply chain, of course, to those key suppliers. And crucially, internally, employee engagement has improved, and the leadership capability to really lead rather than manage and tell is night and day from where they were before. So I suppose the process of integrated business planning was the catalyst to the turnaround for that business. But one of the major focuses of Oliver Wight, working in partnership with Suntec, was indeed the change management side. That's where they probably needed the biggest help. So now it's over to you. We'd like to ask you this polling question, just to get a feel for the kinds of challenges that you feel you're currently facing when you're building a business case to move to IBP. So the question is, what are the main sources of resistance to the change in your business? Is it that people don't really understand integrated business planning? Is it that perhaps there are just too many other things going on? Perhaps people think that you need to address other business issues first, and this is not the burning platform right now. Click 4 if you don't know how to make the change, and you just need some more help with that. And click 5 if really your leaders think it can be delegated and you're struggling to get them engaged themselves, and you know that you won't succeed without getting them on board. So please click. Can we click more than one? Yeah. So click the one perhaps that you feel is most relevant to you. We'll just give people a bit more time to make their decision. Yeah, so most people have voted now. Okay, so the results of the poll then, 54% of you feel that people just don't really understand IBP, and that's the main issue. 19% of you feel that there's too many other initiatives going on. 14% are saying that people think we need to address other business issues first. And then some of you are saying that you're struggling to get leaders to engage, that they think it can be delegated. So over half of you then, it's really a not really understanding it thing. So hopefully we've been giving you today some pointers on how the points to bring out to different areas of the business, really, to get your colleagues on board, and really help them understand more about IBP for them, as well as the business as a whole. So the next slide we wanted to share with you, we suspected that might well be the case. And so we wanted to talk to you about the Oliver Wight proven path for business transformation. Because if you follow this proven path, it's a tried and tested way to a successful program. The first phase of it, there are 3 phases: lead, transform, and own. The first phase of it is really about what we're talking about today. It's about you internally, and then ultimately with Oliver Wight or your chosen partner. How do you get everybody on board with this? How do you get everybody excited and committed to making this change and get people ready to make that change? really understanding when they're at that point of commitment, they know what they're getting themselves into. Because we don't say transformation lightly. This is not easy. And the most challenging part of it is not actually the process design or implementing the process, really. It's the people change management. It's changing the culture, getting people out of their silos, getting people understanding how to work together in a natural, routine way, yeah, where it's easy. So the elements of the lead phase, we tend to start by suggesting a diagnostic so that we can really understand the current process that you've got and the current environment that you're working with. And then we give feedback from that diagnostic to your executive team to raise their awareness and understanding of potentially the gap between the current way of working and, in this case, integrated business planning. And to start to build the vision of what could happen if we close that gap within your business. If you close that gap, what kind of value would it deliver to the business, to your customers, to your supply chain as a whole? And there, in the context of that information and that insight, how would the executive team prioritize this program? Lloyd and I were at a significantly big company in the UK recently, a well-known name that you would know that I can't tell you. When we gave that feedback from the diagnostic to the leadership team, they actually didn't realize the scope of integrated business planning, and because it was so different from their current S&OP process, and therefore they hadn't realized just how much value it could give them as a whole executive leadership team and all of the different parts of the business. They were still really viewing the proposed program as something supply chain did. So it changed the conversation, and it really did get the leadership team engaged in building that case for change, in prioritizing this particular piece of work alongside the other initiatives that they've got ongoing. And then, of course, they're much more interested and engaged in talking about what resources it will take to deliver that change, putting that organization for change in place, and thinking about the steps that it will take going forward. So now you're in a different place in terms of the type of conversation you can have with that leadership team. The transform phase is really when we've started the program, we start to deliver our knowledge transfer to your teams through the education workshops, and your teams start applying that new knowledge to how you're going to operate the process internally, how behaviours will change, roles and responsibilities might change as you apply the process internally. And then you and your people, once you've got the go decision from your executive team to implement, cascade the education on the new ways of working through your own leadership groups out to the wider business, ready for implementation, and then ultimately mature the process. You learn by doing, essentially, as you go through the own phase. Now, we can help you with all of that. We can support you through coaching, but I just really, we just wanted to show you this proven path because you really need to work through those steps. And in the case of today's topic, focus on that lead phase and getting those, taking those steps to get the executive team excited and engaged in the idea of moving forward. So just pausing there, just to reflect, have a think about what we've said. If you do have any questions that you'd like to send in, this is your chance to do it, and we'll answer any questions you may have. As I said, you will receive these slides afterwards, and we'll send you the 2 customer profiles that we've briefly talked through. And if you, there'll be a survey at the end of the webinar. We'd be grateful if you could fill it in. And if you do have any other questions that occur to you and requests for information at the end of the webinar, then we can certainly respond to that, and will do afterwards. So I don't think we've got any questions at the moment. So I will just thank you very much for your participation today. I'm going to leave you a few minutes now to fill in that survey, if you don't mind. Thank you once again, and we hope that you can join us in another webinar, and we will certainly try to gear our future webinars, as we have done this one, in response to the points that you raise and the questions that you raise. So thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day and indeed the weekend.